Welcome back. To see a portrait of what a cabinet secretary attracting the wrong kind of attention looks like, just look to the headlines this week about EPA Chief Scott Pruitt. Allegations of a sweetheart deal for a $50 a night condo from lobbyists in D.C., one that Pruitt stayed in for so long, the landlords were forced to kick him out by changing the locks. A request for a police escort to flash lights and blare sirens to help him get around town faster, including on trips to restaurants. Dissenting officials sidelined or demoted as punishment for speaking up against the boss. And an inquiry into just how much it would cost to lease a private jet for government business. This is just the beginning of even more allegations against Scott Pruitt, and they began to paint a portrait of a key Trump administration member indulging in the worst instincts of the Washington swamp the president promised to drain. Ask the president, however, and he sees an effective steward of his priorities, unfairly under siege. Joining us now, Myron Ebel, the director of the Center for Energy and Environment at the Competitive Enterprise Institute and a key member of the president's transition team. Also, Van Jones, host of the Van Jones Show right here on CNN and a former special advisor for green jobs to President Obama. Van, I'll start with you. Should Scott Pruitt be fired?
Yes. And the fact that we're even having a conversation like this is really, really terrible. This is, we're talking about conflict of interest. You literally could not have a more textbook example. In fact, if you had a TV script for a corrupt, they would say, no, this is unreasonable. Nobody in federal office, nobody in public life would ever do anything close to this. You are working for the President of the United States, and you're taking free gifts from lobbyists. You're staying in the home of a lobbyist. And then you turn around and you do favors for that person in broad daylight, and the president says you're under unfair attack. What attack would be fair? What attack would be fair? If this is not a fair instance of the public being concerned, the media being concerned, and now government officials being concerned about clear abuse of authority at the highest levels.
Myron, looking at all these ethics concerns, if one of your employees did what Mr. Pruitt is alleged to have done, would you keep them on?
He's been a little careless, but I want to point out to Van Jones, he may have forgotten that in 2010, it was revealed that the Treasury Secretary, Timothy Geithner, had lived for 8 months free in a townhouse valued at over $3 million, owned by a Wall Street executive.
And I don't remember him.
I don't remember him complaining. I don't.
This is the kind of stuff. You can't defend it, and so you say, look at what my little brother did. Look at what Tommy did. This is the kind of stuff that's ruining the country. You know better than to pretend that the only thing wrong in this country is that the Democrats are bad or the Republicans are bad. We've got to have high standards for everybody, and this does not meet your standard. I know all about you. You have higher standards than this.
What do you say? Should he be fired? Should Pruitt be fired, Myron?
No. Van, I agree with you that there is a swamp here. And these kinds of things are tolerated, careless, just stupid things that people do because they want to have a first-class flight or they want to get someplace quicker. But
hold your thought for just a second. Hold your thought for just a second, Myron, because it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than the $50 a night condo. Let me put up a list of all the other things that have come up through the course of the past several days. There's the condo that he rented from energy lobbyists. He approved raises, apparently, for 2 aides' salaries after the White House had declined the request. He asked security to use sirens to cut through traffic. He reassigned staffers after they raised concerns about his spending. He requested a 24/7 security detail on personal trips that racked up tens of thousands of dollars. He spent $120,000 on a trip to the Vatican. He hired 12 more agents, costing at least $2 million per year for their salaries. He has all these flights in first class, totaling more than $100,000 in the first year of the administration. He has spent approximately $25,000 for a highly secure soundproof booth for Pruitt. He considered buying a $70,000 bulletproof desk replacement. You're okay with all that? You're willing to just look the other way?
No, but I want you to understand that if you compare this to Gina McCarthy, his predecessor, or Lisa Jackson, Gina McCarthy thumbed her nose at a congressional subpoena. Lisa Jackson used a false identity to avoid our Freedom of Information Act laws, which my colleague Chris Horner discovered, by the way. And so these are these are very serious compared to wasting a few
Lisa
$1,000s.
Jackson didn't spend a couple $1 million going to Disneyland. I mean, here's the thing.
Neither did Scott Pruitt.
You guys have only one playbook, which is to come out and try to find anybody who ever did anything bad before and say, what about that? And I don't understand why you can't just say, as a conservative, this is not the way the government should be functioning. I mean, I'm sure you like the fact that he's pro-pollution and that kind of stuff. Maybe you can defend his policy record, but you can't defend his ethics. And to try to go picking back through everybody who's ever served in government, I don't think serves your cause very much. Here's the problem we've got right now. The worst thing that you can say about a public official is that they are abusing the trust of the American people and the American taxpayer, according to conservatives. And that's what's happening here.
Van, I think that you are losing sight of the fact of what this is really about. The attack on Scott Pruitt personally is really an attack on President Trump's agenda. President Trump is trying to reform the EPA and get rid of the regulatory onslaught that has developed throughout the Obama administration. And the Democrats and the environmental pressure groups can't defeat him on the policy because, in fact, they're very popular. They want to get rid of Scott Pruitt because that will make it much harder for the president to implement his very ambitious agenda.
And before you respond, let's just take a look a little bit about what Mr. Pruitt has done during his brief tenure on the policy side. His EPA has already repealed the Clean Power Plan, centralized control of the Clean Water Act decisions, revised fuel efficiency standards, eased Clean Air Act regulations. Do Democrats want him fired because he has been effective?
Well, listen, he is a pro-pollution administrator. You have somebody. This is a guy who is, in the name of trying to go after job-killing regulation, is ramming through child-killing deregulation, increasing the amount of pollution, the amount of poison in American air and water, which means more asthma attacks for kids, more cancer for kids. That's his agenda. He's a pro-pollution administrator. We don't like that. But the reality is, we've been saying that the whole time. We've been challenging him on that the whole time. The idea that the only reason that the rest of the public is now outraged about him is because environmentalists don't like his record is absurd. I'm sorry, the American people have a little bit better sense, a little bit more integrity than you think. People don't like this stuff. I don't like it. Listen, I think his major crimes against the country are poisoning America's air and water. But it's a serious crime against the public trust to be doing the stuff that he's doing. I don't like kids going to the hospital for asthma and cancer. That's why I want to make sure that we have clean air and clean water. He's got another agenda, that's fine. But then pursue that agenda with integrity, pursue it with high ethics. Don't pursue it in a sleazy way that you would never accept from anybody else in a government official, especially if they were Democrats.
Myron, isn't there somebody else who could potentially push through the president's agenda who doesn't have all this ethical baggage?
Anna, the reason these charges about raising pollution and creating more asthma attacks isn't resonating with the public is because it's totally false. The air continues to get cleaner. The water continues to get cleaner. We have laws in place which Scott Pruitt has said we need to get back to basics and actually concentrate on the pollution laws and not a lot of stuff that is politically correct and the environmental pressure groups want. So the fact is, of course, there are other people who can do it, but once you've taken out, this is the first person who's tried to reform, Scott Pruitt is the first person who's tried to reform the EPA since early in the Reagan administration.
This isn't a reform.
And if he is taken out, it's going to be very hard in the current political situation to get someone anywhere near as good and as committed to the president's agenda as Scott Pruitt is. That's why
and you respond, and then I want to play some sound from Al Gore.
I'm just saying, look, it's all politics all the time. The actual ethics don't matter. The impact doesn't matter. And by the way, this idea that Obama's EPA did all this horrible damage, just to be clear about the facts here, under President Obama, the economy grew and kept growing. We came out of the Great Recession with all those policies in place. And by the way, California, which has tougher, and by the way, California, which has tougher environmental laws than does the federal government, is actually growing bigger and stronger and better than the rest. You can have good environmental policy and good economic policy. I think support for us, remember that.
And you could have good ethics and be able to complete that as well, regardless of where you stand on the policy. Find somebody who matches your policy, who has good ethics. But Van, let's play a clip from Al Gore's and your interview with him, which will air tonight on the Van Jones Show. Watch.
I will tell you that I'd be very surprised if 90% of the American people looking at the facts of that situation did not think that there was the appearance of outright corruption there. And Donald Trump ought to fire him. It won't do any good for me to say that, but if I told him to keep him on, maybe that would make him fire him. But honestly, regardless of party, regardless of ideology or his policies, the American people have a right to believe there is some modicum of integrity in the way our government is operating.
Van, do you think we need to hear that kind of a message from more Republicans?
If this were a Democratic official, you would have the Republican Party lined up and screaming. I've seen Republicans going after, mayors of urban centers, Congress people for tiny infractions. This is an over-the-top, blatant abuse of power. The Republican Party should step up to the plate and defend its own principles and values in this manner.
I'll give you the final thought, Myron. We have seen, by the way, 3 Republicans who have said Pruitt should not keep his job.
He's doing a good job, and contrary to Van's storyline about how great the economy was and how great California is doing under Obama, in fact, California has the highest poverty rate in the nation, and the reason President Trump won the election is because he won the...
Have you been to Alabama?
No, hold it. Van gets to give this story.
Specific to Pruitt, though, Myron. I know you want to talk about California's policy.
Anna, you never told Van that he needed to concentrate on Pruitt. You let him give this completely phony story. President Trump won the election because he said, I'm going to get rid of the regulatory onslaught at the EPA, and he won the industrial belt in rural America, and that's why he's president. Scott Pruitt is an important part of that, and that's why we're defending him over these really small potatoes charges.
All right, got to go, guys. We'll leave it there. Myron Bell and Van Jones, thank you both.